Chris was good at a little bit of everything, but never really mastered anything. He was just an ordinary guy with a talent for instantly understanding anything. In order to become famous, he eventually decided to prove himself. He joined a group of heroes where his gift became an important aid. He took on all organizational tasks, for which he earned the nickname Great Stavit. But before his potential could be realized, everything came to a tragic end. The Age of Destruction began the moment the Demon King of Carnage appeared. That one came from the magical empire that brought chaos to the lands of the Dominion of Light. The hero, Evan, was not strong enough to stop him. As you might expect, they failed to win, and the Dominion of Light fell to the Demon King's onslaught. Just before he died, Evan had only one last wish. He wished that Chris would become a hero, that time would turn back and give them another chance. But Chris didn't share those feelings. After all he'd been through, death seemed like a deliverance, not a tragedy, even if he'd been given a chance to replay everything. The story begins with the majestic building of the dark magic clan he was reborn into, the place where his new game will begin. He remembers that this clan is one of the 12 pillars of the Empire of Magic, and realizes that he has gone back 15 years in time. He is now 5 years before the Age of Destruction began, and while the demonic beasts tend the garden, he only silently observes. Even after all the rebirths, Chris didn't expect to see this. Monsters that used to devour humans are now pruning the bushes. He looks at his new reflection and, clenching his fists, admits it. He knows who the bastard was: Christian van Baron Cassar. Christian van Baron Cassar, Chris's current shell, looks stylish, but behind that facade lies notoriety. Someone remarks that the prefix van in his name indicates that he belongs to a side branch of the family, and Chris confirms this. The house of Count Cassar is part of the Baron family, one of the side lines of the Dark Magic clan, not the strongest but still influential. Although not the main family, it had an excellent relationship with the central clan, and their wealth was impressive. However, the eldest son, Christian, has gotten a reputation as a bastard among bastards. And that's who Chris now has to work with. Christian is constantly getting into fights, and even the head of the family, Count Cassar, has finally given up on him. Even his friends recognize that his reputation is hopeless, but not because he's reformed. It ended tragically. Christian was killed by his own relatives, and it's become a sad norm in their clan. Chris clenches his fist. He didn't ask for this fate, he just wanted to be reborn into an ordinary rich family. Now he sits in the body of the most despised bastard and mentally screams, "Why here, why him?" Chris realizes in a panic, he is in the body of the very Christian, who has only 2 years to live. He was in this body only 3 days ago, and now he knows that Christian's death is a foregone conclusion. If the family, where honor is most important, eliminated him, then the old Christian was an absolute nothing. Chris decides, it is necessary to lie low, enjoy the wealth and stay out of the way, maybe then he will survive. But he does not believe himself. With his good fortune to live quietly in luxury simply will not work. This is clearly not the story. Ragnarok is the end of the world, and it was the Demon King of Carnage who was the spark that unleashed the carnage. He set in motion a plan to sacrifice humanity to complete Ragnarok, and the world realized it too late. The Empire of Magic and the Dominion of Light were wiped out, and only a few survived. Chris realizes that if he wants to stay alive, he must stop the apocalypse, but the army of demons is loyal to its lord. That means that to save the world, he will have to become a being stronger than the Demon King of Carnage himself. Chris comes to the conclusion that there is only one way, to become the Demon Emperor himself. He must not just survive, but climb to the top of the Empire of Magic and take over everything. He has 5 years before the Age of Destruction begins, and he decides to waste no time. If he pulls it off, he won't just survive, the entire mansion and then the empire will be his. But for now, the dream is far off. A servant bursts in and yells at him for leaving his room without permission. Count Cassar is furious. Christian still dares to show his face after his recent scandal, insolence of the highest order. He threatens to personally chop off his head if he steps out of line again, and Chris can feel this pressurizing aura. Pulling himself together, Chris bows and says he's come to apologize for everything he's done up to this point. He sincerely promises that it won't happen again, but he knows in his heart that he must first destroy his reputation as a loser. The Count doesn't believe a word of it and thinks it's a mockery. Christian's antics have been too much before. Chris admits that he too is guilty of undermining his father's confidence and reminds him of his partial amnesia. He bows and says he has rethought his actions. His heart is now earnestly yearning for change. But the Count is tired of empty words and in response only coldly throws that he has heard these apologies too many times. Chris does not retreat. He promised to prove everything by deed, because words alone cannot change anything here. And to prove it, he asks to be sent to the Cave of Punishment. He wants to stay there for a month and prove that he has changed. The Cave of Punishment is not just a prison, but a hell for high-ranking demons, where all feelings are cut off. Even a few days that would drive you crazy, but that's exactly what Chris needs, a place where no one will be watching him. Hearing about a month in isolation, one of the older ones doubts that he'll last even half a day there. But Chris is serious. It's the only way he can win back his father's trust, and nothing less than that will do. Meanwhile, one of the servants remembers how many times they've heard these speeches before, and is disappointed again, and Chris only silently observes. The Count reluctantly agrees and gives Chris one last chance, just one with no margin for error. But he warns him that if nothing changes in a month, he'll kick him out of the clan for good. Chris clenches his fist. Banishment would be a death sentence, and he knows it. He knows that if he loses the clan's protection, his enemies will tear him to shreds. And yet he answers firmly, understood, accepting the rules of this deadly game. Chris kneels down and begs. If he can prove that he has changed, he may be granted one petition. The Count laughs. In his eyes it sounds impertinent, as if he is already sure of his victory. Nevertheless, he agrees. If Chris really changes, he can ask for anything, even though he doesn't believe it himself. Left alone, Chris relaxes for a moment. Hell is ahead, but there is no turning back. Butler Cox, a half-breed vampire, shows up to tell him that the Cave of Punishment is ready. Chris silently accepts the news of the preparations. He is already internally prepared for this hell. The palace is shrouded in silence, but behind his back there are whispers again. Rumors travel faster than magic. The servants whisper about how that lowly bastard volunteered to go to the Cave of Punishment. They recall how Christian once humiliated a lady of the Magic Clan, and how the Earl had to apologize personally. Yes, it was that shameful incident after which the whole family almost lost face in front of the Empire. Chris remembers how being humiliated in front of another clan was a real embarrassment, and decides to fix it. Behind his back, there are whispers again. When will he finally grow up? And hardly anyone is betting on it. He hears all this, but only smirks. Giving myself 2 days at most, he says ironically. From around the corner, someone is watching him, repeating the same words. No one believes he'll last much longer. Finally, Cox leads him to the entrance of the Cave of Punishment. The gates of hell are already open before him. Before entering the cave, Chris notices the intimidating guards, animated death knights. He thinks that such measures look logical for the Empire of Magic, as long as no one dares to go inside. Although it looks grim, Chris shrugs his shoulders, as long as no one interferes with his plan. But then a voice calls out to him, "Brother!" And he turns around in surprise. A familiar face appears before him, Christian's own younger brother, an exemplary student and the pride of the family. The guy in front of him is Turin van Baron Cassar, Christian's younger brother, and he immediately attacks with a magic blade. Chris dodges at the last moment, but the sword still nearly plunges straight into his heart. The blade freezes at his chest, and Chris coldly asks, "You didn't come to wish me luck, did you?" He notes sarcastically how Turin has startled him, but there's not an ounce of apology on his brother's face. "You're a disgrace to our family," he says coldly, and Chris just presses his lips together silently, staring into his eyes. Turin glares at him and warns him that if Chris disgraces the family again, he will kill him. Chris silently accepts the threat, realizing, this is the man who killed the real Christian in the past. He recalls meeting Turin in a past life, during the Age of Destruction, a master of curses. Though he's only a teenager now, Chris notes that Turin was dangerous, but cute to look at, even then. Coldly pushing his sword away, Chris quips, "Stand back. I've seen the end of the world. You're just a boy to me." Turin is dumbfounded by Chris' words and indignant. "What did you just say?" But Chris turns around, dropping, "I get it, now go away, and yes, I'm serious." Cox and the guards watch in a daze as the man simply walks past as if nothing happened. Turin stands like a stooped man, having lost his balance, and the servant is horrified at the tension between the brothers. He explodes, "What kind of attitude is that?" But Chris doesn't even look back, heading straight for the Cave of Punishment. Chris steps inside and immediately feels heavy, as if the darkness itself is trying to press him to the floor. The silence here is unnatural. He hears nothing, sees nothing, only feels everything around him go out. In this absolute darkness, there is only a dull sensation at his fingertips, as if the world is being erased. He guesses, the sensitivity of the fingers is left on purpose, so that the prisoners can fumble for food and not die. For a normal person, such a place is a torture that can break the mind, but Chris only coldly analyzes what is happening. Chris is not new to all this. He has experienced far worse things as an artifact hunter. He is even glad that he is deprived of his senses. This way he will be able to look inside himself and start rebuilding his body. Christian's body is a wreck and exhausted, but now Chris has a chance to turn things around. He once became a divine doctor, mastering the medical arts at the cost of pain and sacrifice. Even the bone-crushing technique he adapted from circus tricks, and now he intends to apply everything he's learned. And finally, the final key to transformation is magical stones with different properties. He recalls how in his previous life he had mined them with sweat and blood, and now he simply received them upon request. He once hid in the mines, risking his life for every shard, but now it's all in his hands. He first uses the white stone to detoxify and cleanse his body, the foundation of any transformation. Though it's a boring and tedious process, Chris immerses himself in the white mana, purifying himself down to the last cell. Even the slightest mistake in this technique causes a searing pain that engulfs his entire body. But Christian doesn't flinch, the energy rages within him, and his body lights up from within in a whirlwind of purifying mana. He almost chuckles. For someone who survived the age of destruction, this is just a walk in the park. Meanwhile, there's a conversation going on outside the walls of the mansion. Everyone is wondering how he's doing in the cave. One of the elders worries that he sent him there for nothing. After all, he might have finally broken down. As a child, Christian shone cheerful, with a sword in his hand. Everyone saw a great future in him. But then something broke, as if he had fallen apart from the inside, turned into a ruin. Had his natural gift made him overconfident and dizzy? He didn't know why, but he was desperate to prove that it was better to die than to live so miserably. Tears, anger, shouting, everything came out in one stubborn look. It's either all or nothing. Christian confidently promised to prove everything with actions, not words. Meanwhile his father, tormented by doubts, thought he had believed again in vain. He began his interrogation. Had the butler noticed anything strange when he entered? Cox panicked and fidgeted, but under pressure he began to tell everything without a word. It turned out that Christian had taken the magic stones with him, including the dangerous stone of dreams. The head of the clan abruptly ordered the doors not to be opened, despite the alarm. A month passed, and still he approached the cave of punishment, preparing for the worst. He imagined Christian was already broken and unable to even speak. The door slowly opened and Christian's figure appeared in the opening. With a radiant smile, he said confidently, "Father, you've come. I've been waiting for you." Christian wondered with a slight chuckle if his father was surprised to see him. He reminded him that he had made a promise, and returned as he had said he would. A memory came to his mind's eye, the same boy, only older. The look in Christian's eyes had been so fiery that he hadn't seen it since he was a child. And when he admitted that he had endured everything, Christian only grinned, "Ha ha. Was that a compliment?" Eisen is faced with disbelief again, but responds calmly, as if it's just another excuse to get stronger. He realizes that those around him think he barely survived the cave, but in reality he was completely absorbed in training. He didn't waste any time. He created the perfect body for himself to master the art of the sword at the highest level. Thanks to the dream crystal, every cell in his body was overflowing with energy, turning pain into a source of growth. A servant tried to dissuade him from taking the mana crystal, but Eisen, as always, had his own way, and he was right. Eisen used hallucinations to speed up the metamorphosis process, turning pain and illusions into fuel for growth. In addition, he went further than anyone else. He created 2 cores at once, and gave one of them the power of light. He couldn't help but admire himself. He even jokingly admitted that he was a genius, albeit a bit smug. Of course, he hid the light nucleus behind the darkness, because if the demons find out about it, a storm will rise. Everything seemed to be going perfectly, but Eisen senses that something has gone wrong, and turns around in tension. Eisen absorbs the power of the crystal with an icy calm, his gaze full of determination and not an ounce of fear. The mana crystal's flash turns into a vortex of energy, the trap he was meant to be lured into. He chuckles, recognizing that they are trying to gift him the dream crystal, an all too obvious and dirty move. Someone was clearly hoping that Eisen would break from the energy overdose, but he only accepted the challenge. With cold clarity he decides, if the enemy has revealed himself, then it will be used as a springboard for the next move. Eisen, looking discreetly into the older man's eyes, demands a reward for a promise fulfilled. He's not going to keep quiet about his right. His companion grudgingly agrees to hear him out, though he holds back his irritation. He clearly did not expect such insolence from a bastard. Eisen asks for permission to use the training arena of the Knights of the Black Swamp, the place where the best of the best are tempered. Thoth is furious, because Eisen is a worthless bastard who, in his opinion, is unworthy to even set foot there. But Eisen knows that this order is the elite, one of the 3 main forces of the clan, and it is there that he plans to show his worth. Eisen clarifies that he is not asking for much, just permission to train alongside the knights to soak up their fighting spirit. He emphasizes that he does not intend to join their ranks, but just wants to observe the best. After a short silence, The older man grudgingly agrees, but warns him that there must be no disgrace. Aizen accepts the terms calmly, but adds that he has another request, no less important. Meanwhile, the setting shifts to the training ground, the place where the elite and the ambitious meet. The Knights of the Black Swamp immediately tense up when they see Aizen. To them, he is still a nobody who has not earned respect. Aizen walks past the taunts and slanted glances, holding his sword and heading towards his goal with absolute calmness. The whispers behind his back do not subside. He is seen as the Count's foolish son, not realizing that they are facing a future threat. But Aizen admits it, he had a different reason for coming here, a purpose far more important than just training. He plans to get into the library, and has already prepared a recommendation from an influential ally. Access to the library with the grimoires of dark magic is what Aizen sought in his second request. He reminds himself that he is still part of the clan and doesn't understand why his right is being questioned. However, the shadow of his past body makes itself known. Someone remembers how the former Aizen tried to sell grimoires on the black market. Aizen realizes that if he wants recognition and power, he must first gain the trust of his deputy commander. But instead of respect, he is met with contempt. To the knights he is still a worm, unworthy of even standing next to him. Aizen is met with irritation. Once again his appearance causes only headaches and dissatisfaction. But he smiles in spite of the pressure, because he realizes that this is the perfect chance to prove himself. One of the knights gives him a final warning, hinting at the consequences if he doesn't leave on his own. Aizen calmly addresses him by name and questions his words, forcing him to answer for them. And when he mentions that the permission was given by the head of the clan, the reaction is immediate. No one expected such a move. The knight expresses respect for the Count's decision, but there is doubt in his voice. The tension is felt even in his steps. Deputy Commander Melon appears with a dark aura, making no secret of her hostility towards Aizen. She states bluntly that she doesn't trust him, and judging by her tone, there's not an ounce of formality in it. Aizen feels the pressure of the powerful 4-star darkness on him, but doesn't look away. He's used to threats. He bows calmly and greets her, showing respect but also a willingness to play by his own rules. Melon is shocked. Aizen calmly withstood her dark energy without even flinching under the pressure. He confidently declares that he will prove his right to be on the training ground if need be by fighting. The offer to fight one of the demons in the arena causes an uproar, but Aizen remains calm and even smiles. His words sound too confident to be a joke, and he instantly changes the tone of the entire scene. He asks for a fight without dark magic, with bare hands, knowing that in this format, no one can write off his victory as a fluke. Melon hesitates. Even if the fight is unarmed, no one wants to take responsibility for the injuries. Aizen nonchalantly declares that we'll see who's who, and asks, as if in between, who he'd like to choose as his opponent. With a sneer and a theatrical gesture, he points his finger as if he were going to choose at random. And suddenly, directly and without a shadow of a doubt, he calls a name. Turn would be perfect. He instantly boils with rage, unable to believe that Aizen had dared to challenge him. Melon tries to talk Aizen out of it, reminding him that Turn is a talented 2-star level warrior. But Aizen knows what he's getting into, and only grins. He's no ordinary bastard to be afraid of stars and ranks. He realizes that power is not just about level, but about who you really are and how much you're willing to put on the line. If you're going to prove your worth, it's going to be in a fight with someone who's obviously stronger, otherwise there's no point. Aizen provokes Turn to his face, and he grits his teeth and accepts the challenge, not wanting to lose face in front of everyone. Excitement reigns around the arena as everyone waits for Turn to smash Aizen to the ground and turn the fight into a humiliation. Aizen calmly clarifies the rules, offering to surrender as a condition of losing, but this is only met with irritation. Melon refuses to go soft. Victory will only be determined when someone is completely incapacitated. Aizen, in his style, pretends to be surprised, and sarcastically asks Turn how he's going to proceed. Turn, seething with anger, promises to shut him up for good, not realizing that he himself has fallen into a perfectly placed trap. From the first blow, Aizen attacks so sharply that Turn doesn't even realize where it came from. With a sneer, he remarks that the fight has already begun, and if Turn isn't ready, that's his problem. Turn is furious, gritting his teeth and lunging back, but Aizen is still calm and smiling predatorily. He calmly dodges the blow and hears a shout of "shut up!" But that only infuriates him even more. Aizen honestly admits, he wouldn't stand up to magic, but in a fist fight? That's a different story, almost like cheating, so much so that he's in control. Aizen throws a powerful punch that leaves Turn barely on his feet, bending over in pain and shock. He recalls, in his previous life he had traveled dozens of battlefields. 2 stars will not save him against such experience. The crowd is stunned. No one can believe their eyes, because the bastard literally smeared the genius on the arena. Aizen, as if nothing had happened, taunts Turn with mockery, offering to blow on the wound as if mocking a child. Gasping with anger and pain, Turn can't believe what's happened and accuses Aizen of some kind of trick, because losing fairly is something he's simply incapable of accepting. Aizen smiles demurely as he looks at the suffering Turn, and confesses, "It's a real pleasure to see him like this." To the accusation of trickery, he replies calmly, "What trick? You're just too weak." He even pretends as if he didn't hear and leans forward teasingly, savoring the moment of superiority. An enraged Turn snaps out of his seat, shouting threats, and lunges forward, losing control. Aizen meets him with a smirk of approval. At last, Turn has become a bit like his opponent. Turn attacks with frenzy, using everything he has, but Aizen easily blocks the blows as if he's playing a game. Grabbing his arm, Aizen instantly suppresses his mana flow, and Turn notices in a panic, his dark energy isn't working. Aizen doesn't even give him time to realize what's happening. His fist flies into Turn's face with flawless precision. Like a predator, he strikes with the calibrated instinct of a fighter who has fought hundreds of fights. Turn flies backwards, filling the arena with dust. The crowd freezes. No one can believe it's over so quickly, and so unequivocally. The crowd wonders in confusion. Did Turn remove the dark energy himself, so as not to harm Aizen? Melon tries to find an excuse for the defeat, because otherwise it just doesn't make sense. Aizen calmly, almost playfully, asks if this fight is enough to prove his strength. After a short pause, Melon admits, yes, he has proved everything he needs to prove, he has access to training. Aizen smiles to himself. Everything went perfectly according to plan, and now he is ready to absorb both sword and magic without keeping any secrets from the Clan of Darkness. Aizen has finally reached first star in dark magic, but admits, he still has a long way to go before he's fully adapted to the energy. He rests in his luxurious chambers, thinking that to master the light power as well, he will have to climb even higher. Suddenly, a torrent of cold rushes into the hall, heralding the arrival of something, or someone, not quite ordinary. Maria appears, a maid who was previously barred from service due to the antics of the former Aizen. Aizen is surprised. He's been assigned a banshee, a high-level evil spirit, to serve him, and he can't figure out whether to be glad or afraid. Aizen is about to leave for training and asks for juice, figuring it will replace the tea that the maid Maria is used to. Upon hearing the word juice, Maria immediately clarifies, shouldn't it be made from human blood? Aizen corrects her in horror, no perversions, only strawberries please. But Maria clearly disagrees. For her, strawberry is just flavored blood. Before he can intervene again, someone bursts into the room shouting, "Young master!" Apparently something new is starting. Aizen goes out for an early morning workout, and one of the servants anxiously asks if he's working too hard. Aizen thanks him discreetly for his concern, but there's a coldness in his eyes as he remembers how he's been mocked and doubted before. Aizen mentally quits. He doesn't need faith or approval, especially from those who used to despise him. The servant immediately apologizes for his words and, bowing, dismisses him with a wish for a good workout. Turning his back to him, Aizen clutches the wooden sword in his hand and heads onward, ready for his next move. Aizen notices one of the guards and is inwardly alarmed. There is clearly something off about this type. He calmly steps aside as if he's just strolling along, keeping his eyes on his surroundings. Glancing at the other warriors, he notices that there is less hostility and more curiosity in their gaze. Aizen picks up his training bag and contemplates whether to start influencing them gradually, gaining their trust step by step. But one character with a bird mask is clearly watching him while Aizen himself slowly approaches, playing carefree. The uniformed man heads towards the tent, casting a worried look as if he's carrying important news. He pulls back the curtain and, leaning inward, names the recipient, the deputy commander. The masked man stands in front of the woman with a predatory look, reporting that Christian has reappeared on the training ground. The deputy commander is silent, but her tense posture and clenched hands give away that she suspects a trick. Although Turn's movements were truly impressive, the question still swirling in her mind is, what is Christian up to? Who would have thought that he would deliberately disperse his darkness at the most opportune moment, accurately reading the flow of the battle? If that was indeed the case, then perhaps he might even be able to surpass Baron, the direct heir of the main family. But the memory of Christian, shrouded in a violet aura, reminded him that he was still the same useless bastard who'd lost his power to a life of debauchery. The deputy commander looks up, inwardly deciding, the gap between them can no longer be narrowed. There is a noise outside, and as she emerges from the tent, a subordinate, confusedly excusing herself, greets her with an anxious report. Turn stands calmly over his defeated opponent, and one of the knights stammeringly calls him a bastard, but immediately corrects himself and reports a minor conflict with a squire. One of those watching asks in amazement what happened, since Cannon is a level I-star fiend. The deputy commander is shocked. She can't believe that Tern has also reached I-Star, and looks at him with suspicion. Tern mockingly states that he wanted to see the power of the Black Swamp Knights, but it seems they didn't live up to expectations, and offers to come out next. One of the knights shouts indignantly, wondering if their order is a bunch of cowards, taunting his comrades. Heavy footsteps echo across the arena as Theron senses his target approaching. Corin stands before him, a knight with a grim face and iron determination in his eyes. Theron grins and remarks to himself that they have fallen into the trap perfectly. Corin rushes to attack, but he doesn't realize he's fighting a predator, not a brat. Theron doesn't hesitate to copy the knight's technique, proving that even a bastard can steal power from those who think he's nothing. Theron cuts the distance with lightning speed, and the knight has no time to react to the sharp blow. He clutches the wooden sword, appreciating a technique he had only heard of as legend before. With each movement, Theron mimics it more and more precisely, not fully believing he's succeeding. His gaze glistens with cold excitement. He already knows that victory is in his grasp. Corin is defeated, and Theron stands over him as if it were just a warm-up before the real hunt. Everyone is dumbfounded. No one believed Theron was really that strong, especially with a destroyed core of darkness. He hints wryly that he overestimated the knights and their training. One of them offers to stop the fight, but the commander, clenching his teeth, realizes Theron is out of control. Theron mockingly calls out to the deputy commander, as if inviting him for a walk, not a duel. She responds by stabbing her subordinate without a word, demonstrating that the Black Knights of the Swamp do not tolerate weakness. The ground flies apart in a powerful flash of darkness. Theron remains completely calm in the face of the raging fury. He is alone among the rubble, as if he has been waiting for this moment, and the defeated knight is only part of the plan. The deputy commander enters the arena, blazing with magic and fury, promising to deal with him in a second. Theron, with a slight chuckle, offers a fight on equal footing, only energy up to the level of 1 star and no dark magic. She hums, clutching her sword, amused that someone with a shattered core dares to make the rules. She launches into an attack, promising to break both of Theron's legs, and sounding like it would be easy. And he, with a completely calm face, replies that he's willing to put his legs on the line if she's willing to risk hers. She reacts to those words with contempt, because she's sure he won't even be able to stand after this fight. In a furious lunge, her wooden sword crashes into his defense, and Theron holds back the blow with a wheeze of pain. But in the very next second, he seizes the initiative, looking straight into her eyes as if reading her next move. The deputy commander unleashes a series of blows, but Theron continues to keep up the pace, not allowing her to break through. From the outside, observers are surprised. For a bastard, he holds on too long against an elite fighter. The commander loses his composure. Her attacks fail to reach their target, as if he read them in advance. It comes to mind that the same thing has happened to him in previous fights. It's like he's breaking through any force. And Theron, smirking, tosses oil on the fire, noticing that things aren't going quite as she'd hoped. Irritated by Theron's taunts, she growls through her teeth and orders him to be quiet. The next strike of her foot slices the wooden sword in half. She can't hold back any longer. Dark energy erupts, and in a whirlwind of magic she prepares a crushing final attack. The explosion shakes the arena, but Theron, instead of panicking, reacts instantly. He has been waiting for this very moment. With eyes full of determination, he rushes forward, exhaling to himself, "Now!" and begins his counterstrike. Theron cuts the distance abruptly and crashes headlong into her with force, catching her off guard. She backs away, clutching her bloody nose, and he stands calmly beside her with a wooden sword in his hand. Melon is shocked not from the pain, but from letting him get so close in the first place. Theron knew her weakness. As a spellcaster with a sword, she has a vital need for magic, and if it is sealed, she becomes vulnerable. He'd succeeded, he'd cut off the flow of dark energy, and now Melon had to admit defeat with a bloody grin on her lips. Melon bursts out laughing, impressed by how boldly Theron ended the fight. She admits that she underestimated him, and will now take him seriously as an equal opponent. Theron clarifies if it's already over, but she hints that it's not that simple. Turns out she scratched him with her claw during the punch, and if there had been poison in there, the outcome could have been very different. Nevertheless, with respect for the winner, Melon admits defeat and asks to be given a chance for a rematch in the future. Theron agrees to the rematch, but demands that Melon honor one more of his requests. She doesn't hesitate to respond, "If that's all it takes, I agree," not expecting a catch. Then, looking into her eyes, he asks, "Will you kneel before me?" Melon tries to remind him that this is impossible. Her allegiance is to the main clan of the Baron clan. But then the meaning of the words comes to her. If Theron becomes the new heir to the clan, her oath will change address. Theron's opponents derisively call his dreams nonsense, After all, the right of inheritance has always belonged only to the direct descendants of the main line. But he, with a cheeky grin, replies, "Is it written anywhere that a member of a side branch cannot become heir?" He accepts the challenge for a rematch, offering to make the fight in a month, and honestly admits he needs time to prepare too. Melon cocks her chin high, assuring her that even then he won't stand a chance of beating her. But Theron only grins and looks her straight in the eye. In this world, the truly impossible almost doesn't exist. Theron says goodbye to Melon until next month, promising to show her who is really worth serving. He hands over a letter of recommendation, signed by Melon herself, to take the next phase of training. In class, he notices right away, the demon apprentices are weak at the base, and in urgent need of discipline and real training. One of the observers admits with amazement, despite his low star rank, Theron defeated those with a much stronger base. Even he, an experienced mage, admits, this was one of the few fights he actually enjoyed. The mentor watches Theron in amazement, realizing, this time the boy has truly achieved the unbelievable. Theron notices the stare, but only interjects with an innocent mien, not realizing that he is already being taken seriously. As promised, he receives the key to the library, access to knowledge that changes destinies. Huge doors open before him, and Theron stands at the threshold of a new stage. Now the path leads deep into the secret knowledge of the clan. With a smile, he sums it up, the mission is complete, and the key has been obtained, and even Melon's heart has been changed. Melon is not just a soldier, she is one of the legends of the Age of Destruction, a former 6-star demoness from the main clan. Theron realizes, to subdue the entire dark magic clan, he must make her his supporter. He admits that he hasn't completely conquered her yet, but with a smirk he declares that he can easily finish what he started in a month. After all, he's a genius. The thought of Count Khazar suddenly interrupts Theron's musings as he walks down the corridor, remembering the look on the face of the man who was watching him. Was it pride? Perhaps the father from this life would turn out to be even better than the one he knew in his past life. Theron enters the library, glowing with golden light, and promises his father to himself, I will not fail. He is amazed at the scale of the vault. It is a veritable temple of forbidden knowledge. Books on blood magic, invocations, curses, everything forbidden in the dominion of light is freely available here. He reaches for one of the volumes, and his fingers barely touch the spine as something clicks. The book pulls back, revealing a hidden mechanism, and Theron freezes as he sees someone inside watching him. Theron jumps back in panic as a strange girl in a maid's uniform flies out of nowhere. She hangs in the air with the grace of a ghost and proudly proclaims that she was once the librarian of this place. In response to his embarrassment, she tokenistically asks if he would like to keep her as his personal maid. Theron's heart can't take it, he blushes, mumbles something about straightforwardness, but she only flirts harder. He can't stand it anymore and shouts, "Shut up already!" And she only laughs back with her sinister "oh ho ho ho." Theron selects a grimoire that contains a powerful spell of darkness, a seal of binding of level 4 stars. The librarian cautiously warns him that it's too difficult for his level and he simply won't be able to handle it. But he replies without blinking, "It's okay. I'm a genius," and picks up the book without an ounce of hesitation. She freezes for a moment, staring at it thoughtfully, as if she's seen something much bigger. Then, with a delighted smile, she mutters, "He's not only handsome. He's also a genius. Just don't overexert yourself, okay?" When asked why he chose this particular grimoire, Theron answers without hesitation, "Of course I had a reason." He continues to train with the other students, but in his head he is already strategizing one step ahead. Theron, an outcast previously despised, is first on the list of potential heirs. Cox is second, and although he's not in the direct line, his connection to the Cave of Punishment makes him dangerous. But Theron can't rule out a third force he doesn't know about yet, because someone clearly wants him dead, having planted the Dreamstone. Theron decides to play on the expectations of those around him. If they want to see him as a bastard, he will give them a spectacle. He notices, whoever reacts with pleasure to his ostensible rudeness is likely the real conspirator. Some of the newcomers can't stand the intensity of the training and snap. One by one they begin to give up and leave. Theron theatrically throws, "I'm lazy, I'm leaving," and leaves the site, causing surprise at the others. At the same time in the dining room, there is a clinking of broken dishes. Something has clearly gone wrong. Theron smashes his fist on the table, accusing the servant of serving him unworthy food. He orders it to be redone immediately without even looking at the others, continuing to play the role of the arrogant upstart. Christian looks at him with bitterness and disappointment, calling himself a fool for thinking Theron has grown up. In silence, he turns around and walks away, and Theron remains at the table with a stony expression on his face. It's only when things quiet down that he says quietly that he's a little sorry. But it's all for the good of the family. He calls himself the devil with a chuckle and confesses that he deliberately spread rumors of his return to his former, disgusting behavior. Walking around the palace, disturbing the maids, spending money recklessly and playing the arrogant aristocrat to create the right impression. Red wine pours into his glass, beautiful, as if it were real, but there is not a drop of alcohol in it. He asks indignantly why he is not allowed to drink, as he is playing the role of a spoiled young man. But the ghostly maid laughs, saying he's too young, and turns all the alcohol into plain juice, despite his protests. He is sure his actions have not gone unnoticed, for even after he has chosen the path of a bad boy, the maid remains by his side. With a chuckle, he uses old magic despite its complexity, causing a beautiful glow in the air, and it impresses her. She's surprised, asking if he's already mastered the forbidden spell, and he confidently replies that he has, modifying spells so they can be used, even at lower levels. He sits on his bed, surrounded by books and quietly contemplates his work perfecting his magic. Her interest is piqued as he continues to insist on his genius success, while she is amazed that she can't believe his abilities. Ian, pretending to be drunk, pretends to barely stay on his feet in order to confuse the observers and cover up his real plan. The scarlet-eyed boy lashes out at him accusingly, yelling that he had hoped for change, but sees only disappointment. Convinced that his brother's anger is genuine, Ian inwardly notes that he can't be complicit in what's going on. Confused by Ian's glare, Turin sharply accuses someone of betrayal, calling it the presence of a rat in the house. Ian, grinning, admits that someone wishes for his downfall, and so he will play their game temporarily. Ian looks at the glass suspiciously and notices that even the wine is fake, another hint of a trap. Pressing his lips together, Turin tenses, and briefly asks who exactly Ian thinks is the rat. Ian answers evasively, admitting that he can't say for sure yet, it's too soon. He watches the room in the shadows, mentally noting that the bait has been taken and now he must wait to see who takes the bait. When a servant brings another wine, Ian makes a scene, refusing abruptly to elicit a reaction from the framed participants. The old butler informs Ian in a panic that Mr. Cox is busy right now and can't make an appearance. Ian, pretending to be drunk, playfully declares that he will visit him himself, causing those around him to marvel at his convincing acting. Suddenly, he slams the bottle sharply on the table in front of the servant, showing latent aggression and confidence. Cox appears and, feigning politeness, asks why the young gentleman has arrived, to which Ian responds with a mere glance. Then, without hesitation, Ian pours wine on him, setting up a public humiliation and provoking him to react. Ian, with a snide smirk, points at the wine again and snarks as if he's being deliberately tried to humiliate him. Cox excuses himself and offers to bring the right wine right away, but Ian refuses with lazy insolence. Without concealing his contempt, Ian orders him to go and fetch it himself, as if he were addressing a servant rather than the steward. Cox clenches his fist, standing amidst the spilled wine, but has to hold back under the stares of those around him. Ian, pretending to be tipsy, pats him on the shoulder and tells him to change his clothes, adding another humiliation to the picture. Cox, gritting his teeth and drenched in wine, discreetly promises to come back later, barely concealing his rage. Ian, relaxed on the couch, doesn't even look at him, still playing the role of the carefree drunk. He notes to himself that Cox is only humiliated out of necessity, but his hostility is impossible to hide. Ian's attention turns to the paper-stained desk, where wine is pouring over important documents. He pulls out one of the sheets and examines it in surprise, as if he has just noticed something suspicious. Seeing the right document, Ian smiles contentedly and whispers to himself, "Bingo, he finally has a lead." He had suspected beforehand that if Cox was indeed a rat, he could be caught manipulating the finances. Ian flips through the papers, trying to find not just a hint, but direct evidence to strike the decisive blow. Cox returns with the wine, trying to look calm, and Ian, as if nothing had happened, thanks him with feigned innocence. In response to the embarrassed excuse, Ian chuckles and says that Cox is his favorite, continuing his acting. Cox abruptly informs Ian that he has a private message, clearly trying to change the subject. He explains that Ian's friends want to meet him secretly, as usual, at their agreed-upon location. Cox awkwardly adds that he'd prefer Ian not to hang around with such personalities, but immediately refuses to judge. Ian, pretending to think about it, says with a smile that he'll go after all, which makes Cox even more alarmed. He notices to himself that it's going even better than he expected, and lets out a short, victorious laugh. The table is set with simple appetizers and wine, ready for an informal meeting in a dark tavern. Those gathered begin the conversation with jokes, mentioning that Ian has become influential lately, and ask Karstana to pour. Karstana, a young girl with a troubled look, awkwardly fulfills her role, but Ian senses her inner tension. He condemns these men to himself for forcing a young girl to pour the booze, thinking them scum. When they hand him a glass, He looks at the wine carefully and hesitates to drink it, as if he suspects a catch. Ian throws the glass violently into his companion's face, drenching him with wine and instantly interrupting the whole farce. The enraged fat man screams, accusing him of cursing sacred alcohol, and Ian calmly replies that his reaction only confirms his suspicions. He snaps his fingers, causing a magical effect that immediately makes everyone tense up. Something dark can be felt in the air. Karstana, shocked, clutches the bottle as Ian leans toward her and asks a direct question, looking into her eyes. He asks offhandedly, "You know how to use dark magic, don't you?" And there is an oppressive silence. Ian drops his foot on the table without warning, scaring everyone with his sudden burst of aggression. He grabs one of the guys by the head and presses his face into the wood with a fury that doesn't hide his contempt. There's a thud and the guy's body flies off, knocking over dishes, food, and everything on the table. Blood splatters everywhere as Ian continues to beat him, ignoring the screams of those around him. One of the contestants panics and asks them to stop, but Ian remains cold-blooded, pressing his victim's head into the table even harder. Ian says mockingly that if he still doesn't know what he's done, he should just let him die. He raises his knife with grim determination, ready to finish the job right here and now without hesitation. The prisoners panic and beg for mercy, confessing that they were going to poison Ian and frame him after killing Karstana. They justify themselves by saying they acted under threat. Someone was blackmailing them with knowledge of the illegal drug trade. Ian, looking up, demands the name of the customer, but one of the accomplices mumbles in response, hesitating to speak out of fear. Ian brings the axe to the groin of one of the captives and angrily asks if he wants to be left without his riches. Scared out of his wits, the man instantly shouts out the name of the customer. It was Cox. Ian, raising an eyebrow, asks if they're sure they're willing to do anything to survive, and receives desperate cries of agreement. He accepts their oath, but he doesn't forgive them. He's just going to use them further as pawns. Activating magic, Ian casts a spell of obedience, causing them to squirm in pain and scream as the order is sealed into their minds. Ian's spell works and the unconscious captives fall to the floor, completely submitting to their master's will. At this time, one of the servants rushes into the luxurious hall and panics to report a serious problem. He reports with horror that the young master is accused of murder after a drunken prank. According to the servant, Ian allegedly killed the servant and threw the body into the river. It all looks like a carefully set trap. The high-ranking man frowns and admits that there's no way to cover this up. It's gone too far. A servant is ordered to take Karsten to the demon court to begin formal proceedings. A senior official declares that the right of immediate trial should be invoked. It must be resolved quickly. He smiles predatorily, already anticipating how the prosecution will ruin Ian's reputation forever. The courtroom begins and Ian, standing alone in front of everyone, is confident and calm. With a steady gaze, he declares, "I am innocent," despite the fact that the whole court is against him. The judge accuses Ian of lying, saying that there are witnesses, but he nonchalantly replies, "How can there be witnesses if nothing happened?" Ian looks up with a slight chuckle and says there's been a mistake, hinting at the appearance of unexpected guests. Everyone in the room freezes as the real witnesses enter the court, alive and well, causing a shock to those present. Ian points to a girl and asks if she is the murdered servant, shattering the official version. The girl confirms that Ian helped her after she passed out, taking her home and even giving her rent money. The witness loudly accuses the real culprits, the two men who put drugs in Ian's wine. The judge asks in confusion what's even going on, and Ian smiles calmly, knowing everything is going according to plan. He activates the subjugation magic put in earlier and orders the liars to reveal the truth to the court. The spell works. The accused convulsively begin to confess under the spell, unable to lie any longer. They admit that they gave false testimony on the orders of Cox the butler to frame Ian. Cox panics, yelling that it's slander and a setup, desperately trying to throw the blame on Ian and his friends. Ian, looking at him calmly, remarks that he predicted this reaction, too predictable for the guilty party. Ian turns to the Lord and, as a victim of the incident, asks to be allowed to question Cox personally. He asks that he be formally given the authority of the court to question the butler directly. The Lord silently scrutinizes Ian's face, clearly realizing that the matter has taken a serious turn. The Lord gives Ian permission to question him, but warns him that the slightest inappropriateness will result in his authority being revoked immediately. Ian walks resolutely to the pulpit, confident, "I will end this quickly." He declares that he is acting as a representative of the Empire of Magic and the Southern Kingdom at the will of the Demon Emperor. Ian begins the questioning formally, requiring Cox to swear an oath to tell only the truth. When he repeats the question with pressure on behalf of the Emperor, Cox reluctantly but aloud swears to tell the truth. As soon as Cox makes the oath, a seal flashes across his forehead. Ian activates a powerful subjugation spell. Cox screams in pain as the magic begins to bind his mind, leaving him no way to lie or evade. Panic builds. He realizes in shock that he cannot resist. The spell is too strong. The court is shocked. Someone present whispers that this is a binding seal of the 4th level, a dark sorcery unavailable to ordinary people. Ian reveals the point with a cold smirk. The seal worked because Cox swore twice, falling exactly into the trap set. Cox stares at Ian in horror, feeling the magic forcing him to tell the truth against his will. Ian recalls his oath with icy fury and demands an explanation as to why he sent people to besmirch his name. Cox squirms in agony under the influence of the seal, but he can no longer hold back. His mind is subjugated. He can barely coax out that he was acting on orders. Someone knew about his corruption and used it as leverage. Cox confesses that it was all part of a plan to destroy Ian, started since he was a child. Ian mockingly clarifies, by corruption, Cox meant embezzlement, which he has long and methodically covered up. It's all been uncovered. He demands the name of the customer, to which Cox, stammering and trembling, tries to dodge, but the magic presses down on him again. Cox screams in pain as the seal forces him to speak, despite his fear of the customer. Clenching his teeth, he finally shouts out a name. Ashid, the second son of the Dark Clan, was behind the whole conspiracy. The name echoes loudly through the hall, and everyone present turns in a daze to the figure in red. The main enemy has been revealed. Cox mumbles in panic that he must run away or he will be killed, for he has just given away the name of the customer. But Ian silently draws his sword and with one precise blow pierces the traitor, not even allowing him to take a step to escape. The senior judge watches in horror as the body falls, the moment of decision shocking everyone in the room. Ian calmly lowers his sword and declares, by the Earl's authority, he personally carried out the sentence. When asked why he chose to execute him, Ian replies glumly, if Cox were still alive, he would have been swiftly brushed off. Ian, looking at Cox's bloody hand, says coldly that there can be no mercy with such. He emphasizes that it's important for everyone to remember that it was Eskid who was behind the assassination attempt. Ian deliberately repeats this out loud to reinforce the impression to all witnesses. Then he opens the portal and orders the judge to follow him. They are transported to a closed training area. There are too many eyes in the hall, and the conversation is important. The judge clarifies, does Ian really think that Eskid will cause more trouble because of the inheritance dispute? Ian calmly clarifies, the family's strength depends on who it supports, and perhaps the judge's decision was hasty. He adds that the current lord is a psychopath, and their family has no choice but to support his younger sister. Ian then declares with defiant confidence that he himself will be the heir. The judge is furious, but Ian cuts him off. Even a member of a side branch can be deemed worthy if he has the right qualities. Ian calmly reminds him that the rule of recognizing an heir by ability exists, even if it is rarely applied. He openly asks why Eskides would want to destroy him, since it was clearly not an accident. The judge admits, though Ian used to be more talented, he's now falling behind, and far behind. Ian asks permission to participate in the sacred ritual of darkness in 2 months, promising to reach the 2nd star in that time. With a smirk, he quips, so help me, father, fully confident in his abilities. The servants whisper that the young master has completely changed, becoming a different person. They are amazed at the rumors that the Earl himself is personally training him, something that rarely happens. Ian performs a powerful hold, demonstrating how quickly he has mastered the art. He explains the technique with cold confidence, bind through mud fencing, and finish through black side style. The mentor is shocked. He only started teaching this style today, and Ian already understands it all and applies it without error. The mentor is confused. He doesn't understand why Ian is separating the techniques so much. Ian confidently replies that he feels there is a more effective way, and immediately tries it out. The mushroom-like creature takes a powerful blow, flying apart. Ian combines the styles into one swift attack, mixing mud technique with black scythe. The surprised mentor is amazed. After all, the creature could deflect normal blows, but it couldn't withstand such synergy. Ian explains that he used the mud sword technique but enhanced it with the energy of the black scythe. The mentor is shocked. He doesn't think even a 5-star mage could combine techniques like that. He's amazed. 2 cursed powers at the same time should be interfering with each other, not combining. Ian, calmly holding the pulsing sword in his hand, says with a smile that it was very simple. Mentor is at a loss for words. His reaction speaks louder than any words. Theon lay on the ground, exhausted beyond belief, and the scarlet silk flag circled smoothly above him. It had been 15 days. He was panting, cursing running as the most hellish challenge, but he realized he couldn't slack off. Endurance directly affected his strength. Just when he thought he was about to pass out, a mocking voice came from above, asking him if he was out of breath. She appeared before him, with a devilish aura and a cold grin. reminding him that the duel was just around the corner and she was looking forward to the promised day. Theon struggled to rise and respectfully replied that he was trying to live up to expectations, and the mentor beside him quietly noted his progress, but reminded him he was still only an apprentice. If Theon doesn't live up to expectations, she won't kneel. The threat sounds like a sentence. He agrees with her words and bows politely, but adds that even defeat will give him experience that will not be in vain. She only grins, pleased with his persistence, and says she hopes to see him fight at his best. She wants a spectacle. Theon remembers that Melon has already reached the upper level of 4th star, and he is not even close to her in strength. He realizes how far above him in rank she is. There's a gulf between their levels, but he has one catch. Theon reminded himself with a smug grin that he was not just an apprentice, but a member of a wealthy family. He had more power in his purse than in his muscles. He asked Maria if she had finished packing his things for the walk, and she dutifully confirmed. Maria was already dreaming of a future outing together, glowing with happiness and trying to look especially dressy for their first time together. But Theon, not hiding his surprise, immediately reminded her that he wasn't going to take her along, throwing her out of her romantic mood. She only smiled with hearts in her eyes and said softly that it was her honor to serve him, and he mentally wondered how a banshee could ever get heatstroke. Theon asked his father to replace Maria with a human servant, but he reminded him the contract was already in place, and without it, the high-ranking banshee could not be controlled. Theon flared up and tried to find out how the contract could be terminated, but it wasn't that simple. His father grimly noted that it would require a deep emotional connection with her, and Theon couldn't even remember how he'd made the contract in the first place, since he'd been drunk. Cutting Maria off again, he said he couldn't take her with him, too many people would be around, and it could be dangerous. Maria lowered her head, mumbling frustratedly that she had been looking forward to this trip, but Theon dryly explained, her spiritual energy could hurt those around her. Maria admitted in tears that she hadn't left the mansion in decades, and her voice sounded almost desperate. Theon froze, stunned. For the first time he saw her not just an annoying servant, but a being with feelings. With a heavy sigh he gave in. He allowed her to go with him, but strictly ordered her not to appear in public. In response, Mary burst with happiness, flooded with pink hearts and enthusiastic compliments to him. When they were on their way out, she asked curiously where they were going, and Theon answered without turning around, to a place where they could make money. Maria reminded her in surprise that Theon already had plenty of money, but he immediately flared up, "It's not a lot. And keep your hands off my coins." He clarified that it wasn't about money, or lands, when she offered another guess. She again didn't guess, and Theon turned away with a cryptic, "It's for something I used to use." Suddenly a voice interrupted his musings. A young man in dress clothes said sternly that he was late. Theon flinched as he recognized him and exclaimed, "Turn! What are you doing here?" Turn calmly explained that he had come to follow Theon, in case he started acting like a real bastard again. Theon was already trying on the rich man look, saying with a smirk that he was just going to the casino. He explained that gambling, drinking and banshees were commonplace among the nobility, and while it was illegal, everyone knew that the emperor himself practiced it. Turn's reaction was reserved and he said he would just go with him, but Theon's eyes rounded at the idea of such an escort. Theon grinned and asked teasingly if Turn was worried about his older brother, but he blushed instantly and mumbled that he was just worried about family honor. As the carriage rushed forward, Theon teased Turn, hinting that gambling would be too exciting for such a nerd. Turn responded by promising to smash the arrogant smirk from his brother's face, but Theon only grinned, not taking the threat seriously. He looked at him with a grin, as if at a naive junior, and mentally remarked, "Today's sucker is you, Turn." Finally they arrived at the building before which even Theon involuntarily froze. The grand entrance was staggering in scale. Even Turn and Maria were stunned. She exhaled with delight that her heart sank, while Theon just stood there as if everything was going according to plan. Turn irritably told Theon to stop looking like a redneck and put a mask on him, for they would only let him inside if his identity was concealed. Theon turned to Maria and sternly told her to hide so no one could see her, then leaned over and whispered something in her ear. She nodded obediently, glowing with joy, and with a playful "oh ho ho ho" disappeared with a slight shimmer. Theon put on his mask and walked in. When Turn asked where Maria had gone, Theon waved her off, "Don't worry, everything's under control," and headed inside the building. Already inside, the two brothers crossed a high-ceilinged hall full of mystery and a subtle atmosphere of something dangerous. Theon and Turn walked confidently into the arcade, unaware that they were already being looked upon as easy prey. Two of the regulars grinned at the newcomers, born and bred simpletons, and thought they were asking to be ripped off. Theon immediately proposed a daring wager: whoever made the most money in an hour, and if he won, Turn would have to call him Big Brother for a month. Turn, dumbfounded, clarified the terms, and Theon added with an innocent smile, to call him Honorable King Imperial Majesty Brother. Handing Turn a pouch of money, he threw in a smirk, "Not necessarily if you chicken out," and the challenge was accepted. Turn snorted and confidently declared that he wasn't afraid at all. The bet was on, and he was eager to fight. He volunteered to start first, full of fervor and determination to prove his superiority. The cards flew noisily across the table, and the first round brought him a quick victory, causing a stir. The dealer praised Theon and encouraged him that if he kept at it, he could win more. The excitement began to build. Theon smirked as the casino gave the newcomer a little luck at first, and then it was just beginning. The casino always did the same thing. First they warm up the newcomer with luck, and then they cold-bloodedly finish him off when he'd made a big score. Theon understood this perfectly well. He knew exactly how the swindlers worked, and even predicted when the downturn would begin. Theon was confused. He was sure it was a good card, but the bets were falling apart, and he was losing. Theon couldn't help but snicker and mockingly advised his brother to just go home and go to bed. But Turn flared up and shouted that he had it under control. He had lost only 500. No, 1,000 rupees. The players at the tables look at each other and whisper. It was clear to everyone that Turn was already a simpleton. Theon watches glumly and realizes that one of the crooks is about to try to lure his brother into a real trap. He asks if Thorn is going to continue, and he doesn't hesitate to snatch the bag of money from him, saying that he's sure he'll get it all back. Theon grins into his mask and reminds him that he tried to stop him, but he thinks to himself, the more Turn loses the better, he'll be the perfect bait. Meanwhile, the real players are already starting to come out at Turn, and among them is someone who clearly doesn't just want to play fair. There was a burst of noise in the hall. Someone was clearly trying to cheat, and Theon knew immediately. Bingo, it was those very people. Maria, glowing, flew up to him and reported that she'd found the crooks he'd mentioned. Everything was going according to plan. He praised her for her good work, while Turn was already suffering loudly, having lost 10,000 rupees and finally broken down. Maria asked with shining eyes if he was a hero, and Theon nodded calmly. Yes, he was super. After a while, they pulled up to the new mansion, and Theon said with a slight smile, "Open the door, Maria." Theon entered the hall spectacularly, instantly attracting the attention of the guards and servants. No one had expected an uninvited visit. Dropping his mask, he said with a smirk, "Don't you know who I am?" and demanded the master of the house. The young master, though a bastard, was all too well known. Grantel himself, the head of the trade guild, came out to meet him and asked with feigned politeness if he had come for a visit. Theon politely but firmly replied that he wanted to speak privately, and Grantel's eyes immediately flashed suspicion. "What's this about?" Theon said coldly that he knew who owned the casino, and accused Grantel of deceiving his younger brother. Grantel turned pale. He began to realize that the masked tiger was no ordinary gambler, but the heir to Count Cassar. Theon confirmed, Turn was his brother, which meant that any attempts at trickery were a direct insult to the family, and now there would be retribution. Grantel tried to wriggle out of it, but Theon exploded, "You want to die?" And his aura swept through the hall, shattering everything around him. Theon immediately collapsed to his knees, trembling. There was no way he would have risked it, knowing whose blood Turn carried, and begged for mercy. Theon clarified with icy politeness. His words about compensation were not empty, for now he wanted to be serious. Grantel asked shakily how much he wanted, and Theon, without blinking an eye, named the sum a million rupees. He shrieked in horror, but Theon calmly lowered it to 200,000, as if it were still a pittance, even though it was the guild's entire treasury. Grantel, drenched in sweat, asked, "Is that enough?" and thought wistfully to himself that he was saying goodbye to all he had gained. But Theon only smiled predatorily and added, "There is something else you will give me." And tension immediately hung in the room. Theon didn't even bother to hide the fact that he'd spent the money he'd squeezed out of Grantel on new battle gear. It was just an investment to him. Maria, glowing with delight, called his plan a super scheme, and Theon only winked. Of course he had calculated everything in advance. But the main find was the sword that was part of the deal, at first glance ordinary, but with an unnatural dark aura. Maria tensed. The sword bore chains and curse marks. It was the Grunned, a sacred artifact steeped in bloody legends. It had once been wielded by a fallen hero who had sacrificed his soul for power, and now it was the weapon the demons hunted. Maria eyed the rusty sword doubtfully, but Theon calmly assured her that everything was going according to plan. Even this ancient ruin would be useful to him. He suddenly handed her the small pendant she'd been looking at in the window earlier and told her to take it without further ado. The delicate gift shone on the girl's palm, and she was confused. No one had ever given her anything like it. Maria tried to hide her emotions, explaining that she accepted it only for her own peace of mind, and to not dwell on the past. Then, left alone with her thoughts, she whispered, "Before and after death. This is my first real gift." "Thank you." Theon waved his hand and said with a slight smile that it was time to go home without waiting for a reply. Maria looked truly happy at that moment and glowing, replied with a bow, "Yes, my lord." As they walked down the street, she promised that she would now try twice as hard to make him the best blood juice in the world, which threw Theon into a stupor. He turned around sharply, reminding her that he wasn't actually going to drink such things, and demanded that she not scare him with such jokes anymore. Somewhere in the distance, forgotten by everyone else, the croupier was still standing in front of the cards, staring into the void, unable to remember who had left a rupee on his table.